Then maybe what I'm talking about is a disappointment, because I'll get tapped in, because part of my dream or my vision is to have people that I can chew on things with. Sometimes I feel so alone, I feel so safe in the world now that I really know that I create my reality. And sometimes my husband, he works with people that have a lot of fear, and he does too, and sometimes he'll just blurt out, well, Jenny, people are just more fearful than you are. You're just different. And sometimes I just feel so alone being so different.
Now think about this. So from that place of feeling alone, you've picked up the alone end of the stick.
Right.
And what you want is to be surrounded by more people like you that are knowing all as well. But you can't get to them from the vibration of feeling alone.
Right.
And so what would it feel like to be more consistently surrounded by people who know that all is well?
Well,
it would
sorry.
It would. We are talking all over the top of you. It would feel like you felt when you read that book. It would feel like a world where everything was okay. It would feel like a world where no one's struggling or pushing against. In other words, that's what it feels like. That book sort of generated that feeling within you. That's what it would feel like. So from that feeling place, you'll begin to discover more and more people surrounding you. But the difference is that book made it sound like all the others would be gone. And so you trust that if all the others are gone, and if the fearful ones, if the aggressive ones, if the sick ones don't exist, then there's not much chance of me bumping into them. Where what we're saying to you is, there's not any chance of you bumping into them unless you are vibrating somewhat there too. And why would you vibrate somewhat there too? Because you're still observing more than you are projecting your thought energy.
And I find, I have moments, long periods of time when people will get sort of interested in Abraham stuff, or they'll say, what are all these tapes? And they'll borrow one, and they'll come back and they'll say, give me another one, give me another one, give me another one. And they'll get really excited, and let me read the book. And I'll say, borrow mine. No, I want to highlight it. We'll buy it over at Psychic Eye. And they'll get real excited, and they want to talk about it, and I'll get real excited, and I'll say, oh, this is great. And then they'll go into a tailspin where they just completely forget everything and go into their
they don't
junk.
forget. They don't forget. They just, even like Esther, stepping back into an old pattern of thought. But you see, now we want to talk about this. When you understand this idea of holding a thought for 17 seconds, and then another thought like it comes to it, and when those two thoughts coalesce, now you got a bigger, higher vibrational thought. And now that thought will attract another thought like it. And then that thought will attract another thought like it, until that's what a stream of thought is about. It's a stream of consciousness. Well, as we said earlier, there have been a lot of people that have pushed against a lot of things. So have you ever stood on the bank of a river, or better still, floated in a raft down a nice wide river, and seen a little piece of driftwood floating? And sometimes it will get into a part of the stream where the current is not carrying it, and it sort of just sits there, and then eventually it will catch a piece of the current and off it will go. Well, the vibrational current that you all live in this physical realm is a bit like that. It's like this wide stream that has lots of different currents. And depending upon what you last gave your attention to, or dominantly are giving your attention to, determines what part of that stream you get caught in. Esther was noticing they drove in Key West, and they drove in Boca, and they drove in Miami, and they drove in Chicago, and they drove in Los Angeles. They've been driving in lots of different cities recently. And Esther said to Jerry, have you noticed that it doesn't seem to matter what city we're in, we're flowing. It's like the lane we're in somehow is the only one that's going. Everything seems to be blocked up everywhere else. And the lane that we are in keeps going. Well, it seems illogical. In other words, if you're in a traffic jam, you ought to be jammed up like the rest of them. But the universe is responding to you all as individuals. And so the current that you are accustomed to flowing in is your current. In other words, it's there for you independent of anything else that is happening. So, but before you know that, sometimes you can have a thought about something, or listen to somebody who was very important to you, and spend enough time chewing with them, maybe over dinner one evening or on the telephone one afternoon, that you actually begin to vibrate as they are vibrating. Well, now the universe begins to respond to you in that way. In other words, it sets the tone of your vibration. And when you're not aware of vibration, you tend to then conclude this is the way the world is. In other words, this is the reality that we all must deal with. That's sort of what your mate is saying to you when he's saying, I know, and these aren't his words, but sometimes this is his meaning, it would be nice, not, he's saying, if everybody could get their head up there in the clouds where yours is, denying or not facing the reality that exists for the rest of us, but the rest of us are not brilliant enough, stupid enough to do that. In other words, it is somehow satisfying to believe that I don't have a choice in this. Esther said to Jerry the other night, coming home from this meeting so frustrated, she said, I would have appreciated it if you would have said something at the meeting. And Jerry said, I'm sure my words would have been every bit as helpful as yours. In other words, these words don't help. You see, there isn't a monster out there controlling your experience. And in the moment you remember that and stop fighting the monsters, even though some of them feel pretty real, even though some of them are very real, in the moment that you stop pushing against them, you catch a current that takes you to where you want to go. That's why some say let go, let God, or relax. Release desire is what many teach. And we know that's their way of tricking you into not having any more resistance, because it is not possible for you to release desire. You are here full of desire. But sometimes by releasing desire or feeling like you are, you release resistance, and when you release resistance, your cork floats back to the surface, or you catch the current of your stream, you see. So getting back to what we touched on earlier, when you say, I would love it if there were more people around me that were having a good time romping through life. And sometimes the way that comes out is, gee, I'm sure tired of all these troubled people in my life. The thing that goes wrong with the psychiatrist's suicide note, almost all say the same thing. I just can't help those people. In other words, as they focus upon the trauma and trials and tribulations, they begin to believe them too. And so let's get back to that phrase. We think if you will reapply it. There was a time when you were using it quite a bit, and now most have sort of forgotten it, but reapply it. What would it feel like to feel surrounded by healthy, happy, successful people? What would it feel like to be surrounded by people like me who mostly know that all is well? What would that feel like? Because you see, it's easy to know what it feels like to be surrounded by people who don't know. Remember, there is never a crowd on the leading edge. And so people who are on the leading edge can get to feel lonely if support of others is what you're looking for. But if the thrill of romping into new territory is what you're looking for, there's no feeling of loneliness. If connecting with your core energy is what you're looking for, there's no loneliness, because your inner being is always there for you. If attracting other people of like mind is what you're looking for, there's no loneliness, because they're everywhere. They are fewer in numbers than the desolate and despair, but they are everywhere. You have easy access to them, you see. Last night, Esther and Jerry were at the grocery store next door, and a woman going through the line ahead of Esther caught Esther's eye for no obvious reason. And she had 3 little jars of Haagen-Dazs ice cream that she was putting on, and Esther said, I want that. And the woman said, have you heard of Marianne Williamson? And Esther said, I have indeed. And she said, have you seen her? And Esther said, only on television. I saw her on the Oprah show one time. And the woman said, I was there last night. And Esther said, I bet it was utterly refreshing. And the woman said, it really, really was. And Esther said, what does she teach? And the woman expressed so beautifully what Esther already knows. And Esther said, that's exactly right, isn't it? And the woman said, you look like you've got some of that too. Now, what we're getting at here is in this city of all of these hundreds of thousands of beings, it is no coincidence that the universe aligned them in the line together. In other words, if Esther were taking a poll, how many people are wanting to be creators of their own experience and are wanting to understand that they can control their vibrational output and therefore control, it would be very slim pickings of people who are consciously seeking that, you see. But there is no risk factor at all. The odds don't matter at all, because the odds of law of attraction are 100%, you see. All that's happening to you is that in your desire for the world to be a happier place, you are picking up the end of the stick where you are seeing the world as unhappy. And then from that feeling place of that, you are wishing for the other. And we know you are exaggerating this, and so are we.